So next week, the teams will be required, among other things, to prepare a team charter or team contract. And it's sort of, it's not an optional, I mean, we do expect you to do it, but we will not be grading them in terms of quality. So don't worry about it. It's not like you have to prepare a team charter that is, has to meet certain standards and has to be 100%. No, it's just, we've done a lot of research, and it's always a good idea to discuss as a team how your team will operate, to discuss how you will distribute the workload, to discuss how you will assign the roles on the team, to discuss how things will be resolved when something goes wrong. And so all of that, if you put it in the form of a team charter or kind of team contract, it sort of allows your team to move a little bit more efficiently and sort of discuss those things in advance before problems strike. And so many students are not quite sure how to develop a team charter or how to develop a good one, a good team charter. And so we invited here Professor William Johnson from Pennsylvania State University, who is an expert on the topic. And so he's actually the lead in our research stream on the effects of team contract and team performance. And so he graciously agreed on a short notice to share his experience and wisdom and guidelines for how to do it right. And so today we will record the live meeting, and I see quite a few were able to join us, which is great. And those who cannot join live can watch the recording. Now, importantly, since it's a live session and we have some speakers, I mean, some audience here, it's perfectly fine and encouraged to participate in the discussion. So if you have any questions anytime during the presentation, you can ask them in the Q&A, or don't be shy, raise your hand, we will add you to the panel. And so this way we can even engage and talk about it. So this way it will be probably more interactive and more informative for you. So this session is for you. And if you have any questions, any comments, any concerns, please do ask them at any point, and I'll try to moderate the discussion and keep an eye on the comments while Professor Johnson will be doing his presentation. All right, so then Bill, it's all yours. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Vas. I hesitate to go by the name of expert with team charters, but yeah, I've experienced them as a professor asking my students to do them. So the reason, as Dr. Taras pointed out, that we're having this session here, and I'm just sharing my slides here, so hopefully you can see it, is to, again, provide answers to any questions you guys might have in terms of how you develop a good team charter. We have created, I created these slides with voiceover for you, so you can look at that on your own time. What I thought I'd do is go over the slides and just, again, be informal, just cover the slides themselves without the voiceover. And then if you guys have any questions, you can answer them here in the live forum. The other thing is I have a couple examples from, that's actually, I think, last semester for a course that I asked my students to do team charters for that I'll show you. It's a little different from the template we're using for X-Culture, but might give you an idea of what it should look like at the end and that kind of thing. So let me get started with these slides here. And again, they're available to you, I think, on the X-Culture website somewhere, right? But as Dr.
Make sure to include the link one more time in the email that will go out today.
Right. So you can watch that too. It's like an 8-minute video that goes over these slides in a brief overview, essentially. But as Dr. Taras pointed out, the reason we recommend, or that team charters have been recommended, and they've been recommended over the past 3 decades. So I think they started getting used in the 80s. 90s or so, there were some, these might be on a timer here, some recommendations. And so, instructors, professors have been using this for quite some time now. And essentially what they're supposed to be useful for is to go through the process of team dynamics. So some of you might have seen or been familiar with the slide that I'm showing right now.
I think it's skipped.
Yeah, it's.
Can I ask you a quick question before we move on? So what exactly is a charter and how is it different from contract? Students always ask, is it basically the same word for, a different word for the same concept, or charter is different from contract?
Well, I mean, people actually use team contract as well as charters, so the names are interchangeable. But the difference is, I know some people might have concerns over the term contract as a legal document. team charters are not legal documents. So it's important to point that out, but they are contracts in the sense that they're an agreement among individuals, and that's what a contract is, right? And so I'll come back to that as I go along. But basically, the reason why we do the team charter is to help with the team dynamics process. So you can see here in the screen, it's generally 4 or 5 step process, right? Ending with adjourning is when you break up the team because you've achieved your goal. So for instance, with X Culture, we're going to end in about 8-9 weeks, right? And then you're going to adjourn, and hopefully you've made some friendships for a lifetime. So you'll see each other and communicate each other, but the actual team project is over, and that's what adjourning means. But essentially, all teams seem to follow this 4-step process. Forming, when you come together, and usually what happens is you're really polite at the very beginning, right? And then it moves on to the storming stage. And the reason they call it the storming stage is that's the stage where everybody starts to disagree with one another about perhaps how the team might handle the project itself, right? And so they call it storming because that's where you might have some arguments here and there. Most of the time, they're positive arguments about what you're going to do. Sometimes they can be a little more stormy, as the name implies. But once the teams go through this stage, the theory is that they're going to normalize. And normalize means, you can think of, again, a lot of you have in your international business courses have talked about laws in the legal system, right? And you've heard the term norm. A norm is sort of like, not necessarily a legal law, but it's sort of the way things are done. And that's what they mean by norming stage. That's when the project team sort of comes to the understanding of how everything's going to work, the norms, the ways that things are going to be done within the team. And that's what we mean by norming. And then finally performing.
Like team culture maybe, or something like that?
Yeah, it could be team culture. And this is the thing. Some things are going to be unwritten or informal, and some cultures are used to that. We call them relationship-based cultures. Again, most of you are probably familiar with that. And some are more explicit based. And so basically, really one of the things we're looking at with the team culture is it makes it clear to everyone, whether you're in sort of a high context culture or low context culture, the team charter should make it clear as to the culture of the project itself. In other words, what the project team members are going to do in terms of communicating and that kind of thing. So that's essentially what we mean. And the idea behind this, the theory, doesn't always work this way, and this is just a general sort of process, if you think about it, is that if teams go through these processes, these sort of stages, that they're going to be high-performing teams. And that's essentially the whole idea of doing a team charter, is try to skip that storming, to make the storming stage much more pleasant and positive. I think that's the theory behind team contracts, so that you don't get that negative storming that can happen informally in some teams that sort of, two team members butting heads up against one another. And so these are sort of the typical aspects of what a team charter are going to cover, right? So one of the things is just identifying expectations. These are expectations in terms of, as you'll see in a minute, what the goals of the team are going to be. And they're expectations in terms of how we're going to communicate and interact with one another. Again, the reason why we make it explicit is so that everybody's on the same wavelength. There aren't any perceptual differences, because it's all sort of laid out in the team charter. So to that extent, it's an explicit document. And so I think covered some of this, establishing team procedures, specifying, importantly here also, performance appraisal methods for team members. So we have issues, for instance, as many of you know, in some project teams, you might have shirking of individual team members. And so the question becomes, how do we handle that? One of the things you do with a team charter is to specify upfront how you're going to handle those situations. And so that's the essence of what should be in a team charter. And as I mentioned on this slide here, you want to be as specific as possible. This is your team's memory bank. So again, Dr. Taras asked about whether this is a contract. It's a contract in the extent that it gets at the expectations of all team members for what the project is all about. It's not legally, enforceable, I guess, is one of the things. So don't worry about that aspect if you think of it as a contract per se. Now, the elements I'll quickly go through, and again, this is in that.
Bill, one more question. I prepared a quick poll for the students here, if they can answer it, if it's common in their cultures or countries to prepare a team charter like the one we're describing. If you can answer just simply by typing on the window. So I see we have now probably about 20 countries here. So in addition to the ones that were listed, we have also Ghana, Switzerland, Italy, Germany, the United States. And so looking at the data here, so it seems like most students voted. So I'll reveal the results. So it seems like in about good half of the countries, it's either never done or rarely done. And then in some other cultures, sometimes, and in at least in 3 cases, it's often done. So I'm not sure which of those are the countries, but it seems like it's a whole spectrum. So some people do it, it seems, but others never. So, okay.
Yeah, and that's probably, you're probably going to find that across the world, I think, because as I said, I think that these kind of things are probably more done more in explicit sort of cultures, right? Low context cultures is what we would define them in, you know, in the international business parlay. And not all professors or instructors are going to require you to do these things anyway, too. So it also depends on what kind of instructor you have. Again, the reason why it's often recommended is because it's theoretically supposed to help with the team processes, to speed you up, to get you closer to that performing stage that I mentioned in last slides.
One more question that we have here. So
yeah.
You talked about the stages of team development, forming, storming, norming, performing. Is it possible that some teams may kind of reach performing, but then go back to storming and rewrite the team charter, or it usually doesn't happen?
Now that can happen, and you know, we usually think of it in terms of we call it a living document, which means that you always revisit it. You know, in X culture, you guys have my dog's in the background. You guys have a pretty short window in terms of your project, but you can imagine a lot of projects in real life can last months, and they cannot actually last years. So in that case, obviously, you're looking at a document that will change over time. For instance, the team goal might actually change given, you know, if you're a multi-month or multi-year project and introducing a new product, let's say, in the real world, as we say, then the team goals could actually change, and that means the document has to change as well. So you always constantly revisit it, and you guys can do that in X Culture as well, although again, X Culture is a fairly short project, but it is a living document.
Yeah, and it's definitely okay to change anything you want to change as the project progresses. So as I said, what you sent to us, it's not something we grade. So it's more for you. We just want to see if you prepared one. But yes, if you decided to change the roles or goals or schedule, it's perfectly up to you.
Yeah, and again, different professors will do different things. I don't grade my students' team contracts either, and I always tell them exactly what Dr. Taras said, which is it's your document, right? So, and again, you know, the question was whether you can change the document, and you can. But again, you should also have all team members agree on the new document as well. Because remember, the whole point of this is to make sure that everybody in the team shares the expectations for the team. Okay? So, and these are the elements here that, again, I go through, but basically goals very important because, you know, we all have to agree what our goals are because we're all working towards that same goal. Let's say, we'll simplify and just say we got one goal in X culture to get the best grade you possibly can, let's say. But as I mentioned, you'll see in the next slide, you could have different goals as well. But everybody should agree on that main or those main goals, and that's what's in the team charter is what everyone agrees on. And then there are other things here, and I'll quickly go through them again, even though you can look at this in the short video as well. And as I mentioned, with goals, you can have many goals, and you can also have your own individual goals, but at the end of the day, the team contract captures what everybody in the team shares as the main goals for the project, if that makes any sense. So as you can see here, it talks about all members should agree. And it's also best to have one major goal, but it depends on the complexity of the project. Again, a lot of projects will have more than one ultimate goal. In this case, for instance, we have this notion that you might just want to make friends with X culture, but I'm pretty sure most of the team members in the team are going to want to do really well on that final report and get the best grade they possibly can, right?
Well,
so again,
if I may add to that, we actually do have some data. So at the beginning of the project, we asked students why or what kind of team they would like to be on. And yes, the majority of the teams or students say, I want to be on the team that wants to win the competition. But we do have a few students who say, for example, I want to be on a team that just want to have fun. Or quite a few say, I want to be on a team that wants to get it done quickly and efficiently. So I don't care about winning, but I need to get a good grade. And so I want a team that just gets in, gets it done quickly. As long as I get a good grade, I don't want to spend too much time on it. So I suppose that's perfectly legitimate goal as well, if that's what your team wants.
Yeah, and by the way, that's one of the reasons why you set these expectations in the front, because in some teams you can actually say, well, look, I don't want to work as hard as the rest of you, but I won't get as much reward. So let's say you're talking about actually paying team members as part of the project. You could actually pay somebody less, be part of the team, do the job that they're supposed to do, but it doesn't necessarily meet the major goal, if you understand what I'm getting at. And that's the reason, again, why you have this as sort of the agreement of how everything's going to be handled in the team. The key is that everybody has to agree to that whole thing. It doesn't mean that everybody shares that. You, for instance, may actually really want to meet new people and just enjoy the experience, but still, because the team wants to win the competition, that'll be the major goal for the team. Now, the other important thing in a team charter, again, it's all about expectations. So the expectations in terms of communication among team members is going to be really important as well. And that's one of the aspects that you're going to have in your team charter. So essentially what you're going to talk about is, in general, when are we going to meet? How are we going to meet? You know, in X culture, it's probably going to be some sort of virtual, like Zoom we're on right now, but you can use Skype or some other virtual technology. But you all have to agree on that, right? You all have to agree on, basically it kind of makes sense when you're going to meet and how you're going to meet. Oh, again, my slides seem to move ahead for some reason. The other thing, of course, is deciding on how decisions are going to be made and whether or not you'll have a leader or not. So in other words, will you have somebody who basically decides for the team? As I mentioned on this slide and also in the short movie, in the real life, we're often given a boss, which is part of our, in other words, we're given the team leader. In X culture, you're not given a team leader, but you can choose to have somebody who, again, wants to put in a little extra effort to make sure everything's coordinated, and that person we call the team leader. Of course, keep in mind that in X culture, that person is not the boss, and in a lot of your teams, obviously, in your courses at university, you're not actually going to have a boss per se, but you might on the job and that sort of thing. But it's very important in this part of the team charter to agree on how you will make decisions. So that's what we mean at the bottom there, where it says examples. By consensus means everybody has to agree on it. It's not a vote. Everyone actually has to agree on it. Kind of like a juror in a legal trial where all 12 jurors have to agree that somebody's either guilty or not guilty. Otherwise, you keep on going until you find consensus. Majority vote's different in the sense that all you need then is the majority of people in the team. So if you have a 5-member team, if 3 people want to go with a certain decision, then that's 60% of the vote, and that means you go with a decision of 3 out of the 5 vote for it. Again, it's important just to make sure that the team is on the same wavelength in terms of how you're going to handle that situation. Same thing with roles and tasks. Here, again, you want to base, as I mentioned before, you could have a team leader who wants to do more work, and then they also get the leadership role. What you want to probably do with X culture is make sure you base roles based on expertise, because I think that's the most efficient. Perhaps, Vas, you can speak to that as well. But my experience is expertise is really where you want to go, because obviously you want somebody who knows what they're doing in that specific section. And that's a little different too from how I don't think that the most effective teams, Vas, are the ones that kind of just say, okay, you do this section, just do it, I'll do this section.
Yeah, we actually do research on that. And so there are sort of 2 main methods of workload distribution. In about half of the teams, maybe a little bit more than half, the team members say, let's distribute the workload by the report section. So there are, let's say, 7 or 5 questions that we need to work on. So why don't you, for example, Bill, work on the marketing section? I will work on the logistics section. John will work on, I don't know, market research, and Billy will conclude with the logistics. The problem with that approach is that while it gives you a lot of autonomy and you sort of can work on your own section on your own time, there are 2 big problems with that. One, sometimes team members do not deliver on their promises. So if you assume that, for example, Vas or John will do his work, and you will just, in the end of the project, you will just copy and paste everything into one document, The truth is that it may not happen. So sometimes it may turn out that John didn't do anything. And so all of a sudden now it's 2 days before the deadline and one section is missing. And maybe Vas plagiarized his section from the internet, and so, or it's very low quality. And while he thinks he's done his job, but it's really not good enough and you don't have time to fix it. Another big problem with this approach is that the sort of the synergy, the advantages of the team are that, as a team, two heads are better than one, so to speak. And so if all people kind of chip in and provide input on every question, then even if I'm responsible, let's say, for example, for logistics or market research, if I've heard your ideas, I'll probably do a much better job on my section. Likewise, if Bill is working on marketing, again, he'll probably do a good job. But if he asks us for input and all of us sort of think about it for a while and then, give some suggestions for the best slogans or prices or advertisement channels, again, that helps him. And so you can still have people who are responsible for a specific project, but you always want to have as much of that interaction as possible. And this is why you create, work that is better than each of us could have done individually. And
right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with that. So you want to sort of have more heads, are better than one. But at the end of the project, especially for X-Culture or any kind of project where you're finishing a final report, I also recommend that somebody, probably just one person, make sure you go through the report and make it unified so that it seems as if it's written by one entity, one person. It's written by the team, but it has to be written that way. And I'll give you an example. Some of my students will write a team project report and they'll have in the section, I believe, or I found this. And
yeah,
that's not a team project. So even though you might have been the one responsible for that section, you don't want to write that at the end. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. And so that's why it's helpful to have sort of, one person to kind of unify, make sure the grammar is good and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and our research shows that it actually works best when you divide up the workload by the function, not by report section, or at least have a couple of people whose function is to sort of like, for example, do copy editing of the final document, especially if you have maybe someone who's very good with formatting or very good at English, maybe native speaker, maybe assign that person to kind of look at your work each week and then put it all together. So this way the rest of the team can maybe focus more on doing research and kind of collecting the information, but the person who is responsible for the final formatting and copy editing will do kind of the clean writing. In that case, it will be a more coherent document, and you kind of, work on your, draw on your strengths. Or for example, you might want to appoint someone to be the team coordinator. It doesn't have to be sort of the team boss or team leader, but just someone who sort of checks each week who's done what, make sure that everything is, going as planned, nothing's missing, maybe send out reminders from time to time. A very good function to have, or a very good team member to have, because again, some people forget, some people misunderstand the tasks. And if you don't have anyone responsible for sort of, coordinating the efforts, it may be much harder to get that final product.
Yeah, and so I think actually that's a really important point to remember too. When I say tasks here, I don't mean the sections of the report, as Dr. Taras mentioned, because essentially, for instance, if you're the finance expert on the team, you might have to apply your knowledge to different sections of the report, not just one section that might, specify pricing, for instance. So it's very important, to take in the role, not the section, and that kind of thing, based on expertise, and that's basically what it comes down to. Now, the other thing, of course, is resolving conflict. And conflict can be both good and bad. Think about it. Conflict, again, one of the reasons we do team projects is because more heads are better than one. And that involves a little bit of conflict. Well, you know what, I believe this, and no, I believe this. And these are two members that come together and they kind of argue it through in a positive way. But that leads to actually better decision-making and that kind of thing. So one of the things that team contracts can do is help with that. It can also help with some negative conflict. I'll talk a little more about that as well. But essentially what you want to do, remember the team contract or charter, there I go, is all about making sure expectations are shared by the rest of the team, by all team members. So you can see here, for instance, that avoiding negative and personal conflict and shirking, as I mentioned before, sort of team members that aren't living up to their expectations. I'll cover that in the next slide as well. You can see the example at the bottom here. A team member must be away for a while. The team member should inform the team in advance, so that makes sense. If someone does a poor job, they will be expected to redo it. So it's written in the contract, in the charter, so that everybody understands what it is. If conflict does occur, the team will talk about it and try to work it out. So again, trying to be positive about this conflict. If that doesn't work though, we'll ask for a coach. So as you guys know, I think there are coaches available in X culture. So that's one thing that you can put in there, and it's available for you if you run into these kind of things. However, at the end, if all of this doesn't work, someone's unfriendly or unprofessional, will vote to exclude them from the team. So that's actually possible, and it happens quite, it does happen with teams. Again, if it's in the charter, then it's quite clear how the process will work, and in general, that leads to more positive results than sort of unexpectedly having to deal with a major problem and not knowing what to do with it. That's the whole point of doing the team charter up front. Did you want to add, Vas, anything?
Yeah, I want to add, sort of three types of conflicts that we see on teams all the time. And so some of them, as Professor Johnson said, are good and some are bad. So sometimes people simply have misunderstandings or arguments or some sort of, maybe even, a conflict about how to go about the project itself. And so surprisingly, we found that conflict is actually good. So when you argue about the correct answer, when you argue about how things should be done, it actually correlates with better quality of the output. So no problem at all. The second type of conflict that we see not all the time, but sometimes happens, it's more sort of interpersonal kind of / ethical issue in the team. Like, for example, we had one issue in the early track where one team member was almost to the point of kind of cyber stalking another team member. So, he liked every picture that she has on Instagram, every picture on Facebook, sends, personal messages 25 times a day. And so she said a few times that she's not comfortable with that and she's not interested in his advances, but he kept sort of, essentially cyber stalking her. And so that one creates sort of an uncomfortable situation, and probably we don't have a lot of those, so I cannot, talk about the scientific sort of, the correlation, but I imagine that that's not something that helps the team to reach the goals. And interestingly, when we talked to the professor of that student, there was also this cultural difference. So the professor said something like, what's the problem? The guy likes the girl. He tells her that he likes her. I don't see a problem. And we are like, yeah, well, she doesn't seem to be comfortable with that and not interested. So, it is a little counterproductive. And then the third issue that we see all the time, and I'm not sure how to classify it as if it's a conflict or not, but every week you will be doing peer evaluations. And as you know, if peer evaluations are too low, below 2.0, first week we see low peer evaluations, we send a warning to the student. Second week we see the peer evaluations that are too low, the student will be kicked out from the team. And so some teams sort of try to play the system. One, sometimes they will not tell us that there is a problem in the team. So they basically give everyone a perfect 5 to make themselves look good. But that often just delays the problem, and then later they complain that somebody is not doing their job. And when we approach the student says, I don't know, my peer evaluations have been good, so what are you talking about? On the other hand, sometimes students are a little, upset or shy, on the one hand, to give low peer evaluations, and then upset when they receive low peer evaluations, and that may lead to some conflict. And again, so here, that's where we've done some research, and we actually see that being honest about you not happy with some of the team members is more productive. So the team members will know sooner and will work harder. And so while it may lead to some conflict, but we see that that type of conflict actually leads to better performance down the road. So if there is a problem, talk about it, because otherwise it will just simply, you procrastinate until it's too late. So just like, like with health care, you want to treat the problem early on and not wait until it gets so bad that you need to go to the hospital. So same thing here.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that notion of the peer evaluations as well is feedback to us at X Culture, also to your professor, and also to your fellow teammates. So it should be, this is the next slide here about accountability, which Dr. Taras kind of touched on here, even the thing about peer evaluations. And the point is to be open and honest about it, because that's where you track, give feedback to your team. And it's the only way you're going to solve problems if you run into the problems. So that's the reason why I think, the point about sugarcoating peer evaluations, if you give everybody 5, or if you gave everybody 1, that doesn't really mean anything. It has to be based on an actual evaluation of the situation. And that way you can really deal with issues that need to be dealt with, the medical metaphor that you've used, right? And so keep that in mind, that's important. And again, it's one of the major reasons you do a team charter, is to make sure that people all have the same, or at least an understanding of the expectations of all teammates, and then are held accountable to those expectations. And again, you all agree to it, and that's the whole point of that team charter. So this would be example here the grades in terms of the peer evaluations are really about how the project is progressing, and when there is an issue, it should be addressed, not necessarily your friendship. So even though if you like someone, doesn't necessarily mean you give them a 5, even though they might be handing something, their deliverable isn't really worthy of a 5, because otherwise you're never going to get the problem solved, and that can actually hurt your friendship, by the way, in the end. So keep that in mind. Let me get this slide advanced here. The other thing, and this is, I think, where some people get maybe a little worried about the notion, as I said, we also can call this a team contract. And that is the fact that people should sign the document. The reason they sign the document is so that everybody understands that the expectations are all agreed upon. I think we covered some of this already. For instance, we talked about changing the charter. I mentioned that the charter is a living document, and you should look to it as a document that can be changed when information is upgraded and you get more information. Feedback I mentioned before. So you can change the document. And then it should be re-signed, by the way. And again, the reason why you sign it is not because you're signing your life away. It's because you're essentially saying, I'm part of this team, and I know the expectations that we all agree on, and therefore I sign off on the document. And that's basically about it. I ended in the short video with this slide, just to use this term and to sort of use the metaphor of X-culture, I guess, as a voyage, right? But the reason why I used this, and a lot of professors probably, many of you might have seen this. This is, I think, a favorite quote by a lot of professors, because it gets at the notion that, if we think of the team charter as the plan, by itself, it's kind of useless. What's important about it is the planning and the shared expectation that goes into that plan. And again, people that are in less, a high context culture where they don't write things down, they probably already know that. And so in low context cultures, that's when they kind of write it down so that they kind of understand that process of planning. But the document itself is kind of just a document. And that kind of goes back to that notion again as being a document that can change as the environment changes. So I saw that's kind of what I wanted to go over in terms of the slides that I created about that. I've got some examples here that I'll show you that aren't in the same kind of format. Like I said, there are examples from last semester.
I was going to see if I can show you some of the team charters from the last year and ask you to comment on them, but it seems like you already have some from the last semester, right?
Well, these are from my own course.
Oh, from your own course. I can show you some from or maybe later on, maybe show randomly a few from the last semester from X-culture students, and maybe ask you to comment on those, like, are they any good? Like, what would you say if you saw a team charter like that? So, but yeah, if you want to show first the ones that you have,
Yeah, I think going back to the idea that this is the team's document, not the professor's document. What makes it good is that everybody in the team knows it and understands it and agrees to it. That's really the bottom line. The examples I have here are just, they're relatively good ones. And the reason why I wanted to show them is they can have a lot of wording in them, I guess, like this example here has a lot of sort of description. This is very similar to the one you'll do. We just changed the format slightly for X-culture, but they all follow the same thing. You can see here, team expectations, the procedures, so that's kind of the communication aspect that I mentioned. So we just reshuffled it for the format that we're going to use with you in X-culture. But you can see here with two procedures, they talk about when the team meets. Now, in this case, well, it was last semester and we're all dealing with COVID, so even outside of a global virtual team, our students are still meeting virtually. So you'll see a lot of this, but you can see here Zoom is being used for face-to-face. This is my in-person team at Penn State. So if this were a real class without COVID-19, we'd be meeting, they'd have things like face-to-face meetings in a classroom, let's say, or at the library and that kind of thing. But you can see here, they've laid it out. Now, in this case, they do a simulation on a real company. So one of the students is sort of chosen as the CEO. So to that extent, this is an example of a team that would have a boss, but the boss isn't really the boss. They don't tell you what to do. The CEO really takes on the role as the coordinator of the group. Kind of as Dr. Taras sort of pointed out, you guys can choose a person to do that if you want. It helps because then you have some coordination For this course, it helps because then that's the person I, as the professor, can communicate with if I need to on behalf of the whole team. And you can see here they've listed what, to the best of one's ability, given a reasonable time frame, is what they expect the project standards to be. The strategies to fulfill those standards. So what strategies are what they're going to do to actually achieve the project standards or goals that they have. Team participation. So again, they have a fairly detailed couple sentences per person accountability that we talked about before. They put in here about what the expected attendance is for the meetings. Every once in a while, people might not be able to show up to a meeting, but usually what a team will say in a charter is let the rest of the team members know. And obviously don't miss more than, it's kind of like your courses. I tell my students, if you miss more than 2 weeks of class, even if you're sick, it basically means you really didn't do the course, because that's like, what, 20% of the course, let's say. After a while, did you really do the course or not? Probably not. So you can miss a class here and there, but you can miss a meeting here and there, but make sure that you're there for 80%. And they put that in there. And then failure to follow those procedures, that's sort of the accountability thing again. What's going to happen? And essentially, they're saying the first offense is they'll have a team meeting to discuss the issue. And in this case, it looks like they have 4 offenses. So they allow a lot of leeway until you finally get to the 4th offense, which is come to talk to me about the offenses. So they're quite lenient that way, I think. But they've made it clear in this document. And then as you can see here, these are the students, and the way we do it with virtual stuff is just print your name on here. The whole idea is, as I said before, the reason you sign off on the document is to make sure that everybody understands it and agrees to it, right? It's not a legal defining document. Now here's an example from the same class, but a different, let's see if I put on the 2-page view. Much more bullet form, as you can see here. So in this case, again, they have all the information there, but in a much more brief, concise manner. So they didn't put it into full sentences. And it's just as good as long as it's clear what the expectations are of the team. And it's obviously a lot shorter document than the other one. For instance, you can see here that they just have, essentially it looks like they have two levels here. Meet as a team about whatever infraction happens, and then if they think it's warranted, then they come talk to the professor. So, and again, they sign off on it. So those are the 2 examples that I had, just to show you that they don't have to be long and winded. They just have the right amount of information such that everybody agrees to it.
Yeah. I can show a couple of examples from the last year, just as an example here, if you give me a second. So here are a few that I randomly selected from the last semester, and I even tried to highlight the key points. So team 38 last semester, so the main goal was to do better than the rest of the teams, surpass the teams. For communication, they mentioned that they want to have at least 2 video voice calls per week. For leadership, they said we don't want to have a team leader. These are the roles. And as you can see, so here, like for example, Alessia will do most of the research. And then Sophie will do most of the research, but also copy editing. So she's probably a native speaker here, or I don't know. And then Xandra will do research, but also will be responsible for this section and this section. And then they discuss what happens, for example, if the team member doesn't abide by the team rules, and they say that we'll first warn them, but if not, we will exclude them from the team. Then what happens if the team member is not participating for like legitimate reasons, maybe health related or something, and they discuss what happens. Peer evaluations, they promise to be honest with each other and not sort of sugarcoat it. And then I see at the end, they even provided, apparently even some people, real signatures, others sort of typed in the signatures. Here is another one that is a very simple one. So here it's basically 1 page, not even a page. I just thought I would include it. So they talked about the distribution of tasks, and they said, who does what. They said that they're going to have weekly meetings on Mondays to discuss how things do. They said that they will be sharing everything in Google Docs. So as a kind of central location for the work they do. In dealing with the conflicts and free riders, they basically said no toleration. So we'll just go through that right away. So team will be, the work will be completed by the rest of the team. And then this one, it just looks pretty, so I thought I would show it. So team 350, so they list the team members first here, and then they, the purpose of the team, successfully complete the project, but they do not necessarily want to be the winner, but they will try to be among the top 10%. So fair enough. And then the roles, again, they have here, one person, as you can see, will be a copy editor. So they decided that they will distribute it that way. Then another person will be the team coordinator, so Tyrone. And then, so it's basically more kind of by the function as opposed to by the report section. And so there is a little bit more on, the role of the team coordinator here. And then, so what else do they have here? Oh, so they talk about each of the team members, kind of explain their role in more detail. And then selection of the client company. So they selected a company called Good Earth Oils. It's a company that makes canola oil out of Australia. And so dealing with the free riders and dealing with the decision-making and the conflicts. So they have that information, and it seems like they didn't put the signatures here, which is fine.
Yeah, I think they all look good. Again, as I mentioned, you can have any format you really want. What I'm going to do, I'll show you I believe this is the one we're using, right? Last, I think it's on somehow available to the students.
The sample?
Well, no, this is the template that I had sent you.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
So this should be available to all of you in X-Culture as the template that you we're recommending you use this. Like I said, the team charter is really about expectations that everybody agrees to.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to circulate those documents again, yeah.
Yeah, this is a good format, and this is the one that we're giving to you, and essentially you should use this for the X-Culture project. Although, like I said, professors will have different things, but they all generally have those expectation aspects to them. And here we basically follows what I just showed you in the slides I just showed a few minutes ago. So goals, communication style, the decision-making processes or processes for sort of British pronunciation, roles and tasks, and then finally dealing with conflict and that kind of thing, accountability. And then I recommend, like I said, I guess have the date on it or whatever. It doesn't have to look like I said, legalistic. The whole idea here is that you have them, people sign off on it just so that everybody agrees to it, and there's nobody that says, "Oh, I didn't know about that." That's just a way of sort of double checking on that. But as you can see here, it's got a little bit. It starts off with a little bit of a discussion of why doing a team chart, and then going into the template that you can actually use. So basically, you can put your answers down here as a team. What you come up with is totally up to you guys as a group. But use this format; it'll make it a lot easier.
Vincent, I saw you raised your hand. Did you want to ask a question? I added you to the panel, or was it just accidentally? I'm not sure. Maybe he just raised the hand.
No, please. No, please.
Oh, go ahead, please.
No, please.
Was that Vincent? Go ahead.
I think he said no.
There's no question.
Okay,
no
okay.
question.
Oh, sorry. I thought you wanted to ask a question. No problem. All right, well, then I guess we can conclude this session at this point. And so unless you have any other questions, students, either about the team charter, so a couple of students asked if the recording will be available. Of course, it will be. And the template, again, I'll make sure that it's all available to you so you can take a look at it and take a good team charter.
That's, I think, David Arthur.
Yeah, let's let David here. So David probably is asking the question. All right. So, yeah. David, did you have a question or? I don't know, maybe again accidentally was playing with the...
Okay, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I was asking if there has been a possibility where the team was done with the charter and maybe one team member didn't agree with something in it, and because of that, he decides not to sign. And in that case, how is the other members of the team going to handle this?
I've never experienced that myself. One thing, obviously, I don't know, did you want to take that from the X-Culture perspective? Because from any general perspective, what it really means is that person doesn't want to be part of the team in the end. But
yeah, I'll say that sometimes, yeah, there are some disagreements. Like, for example, I'm not sure about the team charter itself. I mean, the whole point is to negotiate and, work out decisions together. But what if, for example, you want one company as a client and somebody else wants a different company? Or what if you want to work on the marketing section, but then somebody else also wants to work on the marketing section and you have a kind of disagreement about that. So those kinds of issues can obviously happen. But the point here again is X-Culture is an exercise in international collaboration and teamwork. It's not an exam, it's an exercise. And so the whole point here is like we add some of these activities for you, like, get to know each other. For example, as you needed to do for the survey this time. So where we had questions about, does this team member have a pet at home, or does this team member have a job outside the school? It's not because we are interested if you know those answers. It's we want to prompt you to interact. Same thing with the team charter. So it's not really that we want to see your team charter. We just think, one, it will improve your work, but second, we want you to engage with your team members and have that negotiation. And even if in the end you do not reach an agreement that everybody is happy with, that's okay. I mean, in life that will happen all the time as well. But at least you will have that experience of, trying to talk to other people and maybe disagreeing on some things and trying to work it out. And, if you can work it out, great, but if not, that's fine too. So at least you will know what to expect when you have a similar situation in the future, and you will have that situation all the time. So therefore, yeah, don't lose your sleep if you cannot reach an agreement, or don't panic if something doesn't work out the way you expected. It's all about trying and trying to work it out. If it works, great. If not a huge deal. So do your best and know better for the next time, basically.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think the theory is they're supposed to help with the team process. So like I said, I've never run into that situation before, but I think Dr. Taras is right. In the end, it's about trying to come together and agree on if you can't agree, then you go from there, basically.
Yeah, as I always say, Xculture is almost like a time machine. And it's not going to take you to the future, but it's going to show you the future, so to speak. And so when you are working as part of your kind of real job in a team, which you will all the time, and probably now it will be mainly or a lot in global virtual teams, where your team members are all around the planet. Whatever challenges you will see here in Xculture, those are the same challenges you will see in your real team. There will be team members who are in a time zone that does not allow you to participate in a team meeting. There will be team members who are perhaps disagreeing with you, or are too bossy, or maybe too shy, or maybe have a different opinion or views on things. And so you will see those problems over and over and over again. And so the purpose of Xculture is to allow you to experience those challenges now, so you can work out some sort of an intuition of what works, what doesn't, how to approach it in the future, so that when you have to do it again as part of your kind of real job, you know better what to expect and better what to do about it. And so team charter is one of those negotiations that sort of puts you in that situation. I'm not sure if you're going to have a team charter in your sort of work team, but there will be some sort of negotiations like this one. And so at least you will be more prepared and better prepared for dealing with that situation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks like there's a couple of chat questions here too. You might want
to. So one is about a connection problem. So the recording will be available right after this meeting. So no worries, you can always watch it again. And then what if one team member does not answer emails? How do we contact the team in person? A very, very good question. So one, if you already experienced that problem now, don't worry too much about it. It's been only like 2 days since we formed the teams. And so at this stage, it's really too early to panic. Maybe that team member is traveling, or maybe busy with another, exam or something else. So at this time, it's still too early to worry about it. But let's say it will be another 3-4 days and you've never heard from the team member back. So one, obviously in peer evaluations, in fact, the first one that is due today, it specifically asks you, have you been able to communicate with this team member? And if the team tells us that somebody, that most of the team members were not able to reach somebody, we obviously will take that as a problem. We will try to reach to that person's professor, see what's going on. Hopefully the issue will be resolved, but if not, obviously the team member will be kicked out of the project because, if he's not or she's not communicating, that's not good. If something like that happens in the middle of the project, again, try to reach the person. Maybe the person got sick or something, like legitimate reason. But if not, you can ask for coaching. So the coach will then reach out to the professors, to the student's professor and try to work it out. But while you're also trying to work it out either through coaches or directly with the student, you can also, or should also give low peer evaluations to that team member. And again, as I said, if most of the team members tell us that the person is not communicating or not doing their work, then obviously we will send a warning. And if that doesn't help, we will just kick out the person from the project, from the team. At the same time, if you kick out someone from the team, we do have a few countries where the semester starts late. Like for example, this semester we will have students from Germany and from Japan who will be joining a little bit later. So we will have some students sort of available to be added to teams next week. And so if you have someone on the team who is not working and your team decides to kick out that person from the team, there is a very good chance we may even be able to replace that person with someone new, or maybe just simply add one extra person to your team. Again, on the surveys that you will do every week, there will be a question if you want more people on your team. And if most of the team members say, yes, we need more people, there is a good chance we may be able to add an additional person. So again, honesty is not only important when you communicate with your team members, but also when you communicate with us. And again, we are on your side. So we are not on your professor's side, so to speak. So if there is a problem, it's not like we will complain and the professor will give you a good, low grade. No. When we hear about problems, we are on your side. We will assign a coach to the problem. We will reach out to the professor of the problem student. So we will try to resolve it sort of, to the satisfaction of your team. So as long as you tell us, we will do something about it.
It looks like there's one last, where they can get the template, basically.
Yes, so I'll make sure to circulate. So we have several materials related to this project. One, the recording of this session. Two, there is a pre-recorded session, like 8 minutes of what Team Charter is. And that is also available on the website, and I'll send you the link again. And also there you can find the template again for download, and I'll circulate it one more time so you have all that information so that you can prepare a proper Team Charter. Yep. And Millicent, you also raised your hand. Did you have a question? Do you want to ask something? I'm not sure if, again, it was an accidental push of a button, or Millicent, did you have a question? Maybe it was some accidental, press the button. All right, so then thank you so much, Professor Johnson, for taking the time to share your wisdom and expertise here. So hopefully that will help the students and will serve them well throughout their career, because it's not the only time when they need to prepare a Team Charter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, bye-bye.
Have a fun X culture experience, everyone.
Yep, thank you. Bye-bye.